The biggest thing is to have a story and know your data, because you could go invest tons of money in this, and if your data is just swampy, you're going to have a swamp. When I say know your data, clean data, marshal data, and I know that sounds like a very pipe dream, but get your identity data right first. And what does that mean? So how many companies onboard people without doing verification or proofing? In the workforce, a lot. They take HCM systems word for it, like, yeah, I proofed the person, they faxed me over the I-9s and the license thing, manual entry. I mean, let's face it, it's public knowledge that there are some countries that are coming after domestically, and they're faking documents. Gen AI is a thing. It's very easy to fake stuff now, right? So getting that right at the entry point makes everything else clean and simple. But if you get it wrong at the entry point, you create a fractured web of just distributed nonsensory. And yes, you can trademark that word and use it royalty free, but you want to create line segments. Like, you want to have event, data, event, action. But if you have, is this Jeff? I don't know. But if you give Jeff the wrong entitlement, security risk. If you onboard Jeff twice, now I have 18 accounts to worry about. So in a way, if you get your data right, you can decrease your spend across the board on PAM, IGA systems, account management. You won't have account drift. You won't have account sprawl, role sprawl. All those are real problems. They always start at the base foundation of your data. Like, know your data.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and hey, you're not Jim. Who are you, stranger?
Not Jim.
No, you're Sean O'Dell. You're an identity guy at Disney. You're going to be my co-host today. Jim is on assignment, as we like to say, in the press business. So he's got the night off. You and I are going to record something here. So I'm going to have to swear you in, because we're going to have to make sure that this is official. So I'm going to have you repeat after me, Sean. I state your name.
I state my name, Sean O'Dell.
Of my own free will, I'm here on the Identity at the Center podcast.
Of my own free will, am here on the Identity at the Center podcast.
The views expressed here are my own and do not necessarily reflect that of my employer.
The views expressed here are my own and do not necessarily reflect that of my employer.
You got it. It's official. Welcome to the Identity Center podcast, Sean. Again.
Good to be back on again.
Pleasure. So it's been about a year since you were here with us. We were talking here before we hit the record button. 1 year and 1 day since our last episode went live. And I'm not going to make you relive your origin story. I'll point people back to episode 255. That was back in January 2024. This is going to be episode, I think, 328. So we've been rolling along here. I guess, give me a little bit of update before we get along. Anything new in your world that you want to share?
I now have 2 kids versus 1. So I have Kelly Ray, named after, Ray, because son's name is Luke, named after, obviously, Luke Skywalker. New stuff at work, but just more responsibility, doing more cool stuff. But other than that, I mean, taking more of a role in the industry, working more closely with the likes of like Atul, Toshiba Gwale, Ian Glazer. Doors opening a lot for stuff in OIDF. So I'm pretty excited about it, honestly. And it's like, why I'm here talking to you about this exact topic is because things are starting to all meld together. So I thought this would be a good topic to bring to the greater population of people. So a lot of stuff is changing, but it's for a lot of good stuff.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. You and I have actually kept in touch since that last episode, and I've gone back and forth with texts and messages and a bunch of different stuff. I will say, I'm going to give you credit because you have the coolest background of, I think, any of the guests that we've had. I know a lot of people like mine, but yours is next level with all the Star Wars stuff. Give me a quick tour, because it looks like over your left shoulder is maybe some lightsabers, and then you've got some figurines and statues and things like that?
So I have these are the dark side sabers over here. You can't see, but in my office, there's the light sides over there. Then I have like a Mando closet. Then I have an armory, but top shelf is just more like statues of, you can't see, but I'm gonna wiggle my camera if you're okay with that.
Sure.
There's like Ahsoka and Rey and Ahsoka, but then the middle one is more of like my Clone Wars army. Then that's like the traditional Jedi, and the bottom shelf is the dark side. But can't go that low because I mean, unless you're okay with this. So let's see how it turns out. But there's the dark side stuff. You have the Royal Guard and more stuff. But I've always wanted to, and since I was a kid, like love collecting. I have all the old toys, but I have a very, very forgiving wife who allows me to do this. So I love having it. It's my thing. It's my vice, you know.
It's pretty cool, and definitely forgiving a partner is always helpful with that. I also hear some younglings or Padawans rolling around in the background, so they've started their training early, I assume.
They have. They're earning their both their IAM certificates and their Padawan training certificates at the same time. So,
sounds pretty happy about that one too. The last time we were met in person, I guess, would have been probably in the fall, and you and I were at Identiverse. And are you going to be at Identiverse again this year?
Yep.
Okay. And I assume you're going to probably be looking to get on the schedule, do some things. I know this stuff haven't been announced yet, but I'm sure it'll be fun. So people who missed it last time, you were nice enough to ask me to host a panel around shared signals framework and CAEP. And I thought it went really well. We had a full room. I think a lot of good questions come out of it. So
it was enough to where the Q&A format that we did, like you asked some great seating questions, but then it just took off, and shirts didn't, the shirts didn't hurt either. But I think the format went very well. I submitted for another panel, so if it gets picked up, who I'm going to call to come moderate. So I can't wait. So we'll see if it gets picked up, but hopefully so.
Well, I'm happy to do it. So you let me know and I'll be there for you. I'm going to be at EIC for the first time, 2025 in Berlin. Have you been to EIC before? European Identity and Cloud Conference? No.
It's hard to travel across the big ocean when you have a 3-month-old right now. Can't really do that.
Yeah, I can see that. It's also expensive too. So we're figuring that one out. But Jim and I are planning on being out there. Give people a heads up. It's like, hey, we're going to be out there in May. We've got a discount code. So if you're going to be at EIC 2025, it's May 6th to the 9th in Berlin. I've mentioned this on previous podcasts. My first time going to Berlin, so I'm very excited for that. And I'm probably going to hit Europe at large around there. Not sure yet what I'm going to be doing, but I know that like Amsterdam is on the table, maybe Denmark, somewhere in that area, maybe somewhere like Munich. So still figuring it out. But you can show support for the show if you want to register. We've got a discount code. It'll be on our website right on the homepage. It'll also be in the show notes. But if you use the code IDAC25MKO, that gets you 25% off. So be sure to use our discount. Take advantage of free savings. Doesn't cost you anything, and just show support for the podcast here. So I appreciate that. If you guys,
I know you're a foodie.
I am.
Europe, unmatched. The food is amazing there.
I'm looking forward to the food. I think that's the one thing that is always unique when you go somewhere new, and if there's local or regional type stuff. And we actually had Martin Coopringer on here last couple weeks ago, I think it was at this point. And so I asked him some questions about that. So if you've got food suggestions, hit me up on LinkedIn, especially in the Berlin area, because I'll be looking for stuff to do while I'm there for that EIC week. So yes, thank you for bringing that up.
I had some of the best carbonara in Berlin.
Really?
Which is amazing. I don't even understand how. But then I went to Italy and had chef's kiss.
Like, yeah, stand back. Hold my jacket here while I make you real carbonara. I introduced you as an identity guy at Disney. Help me understand what an identity guy does. Maybe just kind of level set and kind of provide some context around sort of your background.
So my official title is Senior Staff Security Engineer for Consumer and Workforce. I am, because identity and security should be blended into one domain. I think most companies are going that way. Anyways, I traverse the consumer IAM domain at Disney. I work a lot with a lot of you may know him, Chuck Mortimer. He did a lot of stuff with OAuth. And on the workforce side, every global brand you can think of at Disney, I have my hands in the pie of IAM. Pick the flavor of domain you want to talk about: provisioning, LCM, SSO, auth, factor management, all of it's there. So my scope is a global, so I don't really have like fix this one use case. It's more like, here's this problem for 100,000 people, go after it. So it's a lot of fun. Every day is different. Learning a lot that identity is the lifeblood of the business, and it all starts there. Identity is intertwined in almost everything you do at a company. So it's very tangential, and it's also important to not get wrong.
Yeah, kind of important. Yeah. I would say it's at the center, right? We call the podcast for that reason. And I don't know about you.
I did not say that out loud, but it is at the center. You're correct. Yes.
Cha-ching! That trademark. You have to give me a nickel every time you say it. I have seen, at least, from my clients in my day job and things like that, and other people I've talked to, where it seems like identity is having a little bit of a moment here, where the recognition, I think, is starting to get to what I would call the appropriate levels, even within an organization. Say, oh, this is something we can't skimp on or wait on. We've got to get it right. And it could be for any number of reasons, right? It could be security, it could be compliance or risk type things, or it could even just be, hey, we need a better user experience for our customers, right? Things like that. Do you see that same sort of trend in your travels and discussions with other folks in this space?
I do. I used to always think consumer identity got all the bang for the buck, all the money because of the user experience, but it's traversing into workforce. A lot of the stuff that you're seeing, like in the consumer world, you have like consumer data platforms. You want to know the 360 view. You want to have the 360-degree view of your customer to know how you upsell, market, cross market, make money, right? Same concept in workforce. You want to know what your workers doing, why they're doing it, how's it more efficient. Like if you can drive down login times 10x, that's efficiency. If you log in less, you can be more productive. And everyone's talking about AI now. You have to know what a worker's doing, because if you start offloading work to a bot, you got to understand, is it ethical for that bot to do what that person's doing? But AI is a different conversation. Not why we're here. But I do see it very much so. And across many travels I had with a lot of friends who work at different companies, they're seeing the same thing. They really are.
So the last time you were here, we talked about some new, at least to me at the time, a year ago. We talked about shared signals framework, SSF, and continuous access evaluation protocol. I got it right. CAEP is how we pronounce it, CAEP. I want to take a stab at sort of summarizing it real quick, and then you can tell me if I got it right, because I feel this is an area that people are still kind of trying to get their heads around and understand. But I see this as potentially a next wave that we're going to see here in IAM. But let me start with SSF. It's basically a standardized messaging system that allows different security platforms to share threat information in real time. And I guess maybe not necessarily threat information, but share information in real time.
Yeah. Stated a little bit differently. It doesn't have to be a security platform. It could just be platforms. Mm-hmm. But you're spot on.
And I guess is it similar to what people might think of maybe like a service bus or a messaging bus?
The messaging bus is how you orchestrate it. The framework is how you talk the same language. Because like to get to zero trust, people got to talk. So if you speak Japanese and I speak English, I got to translate, right? Mm-hmm. But as long as we speak the same framework, it works out. So if you're company A and I'm company B, and I send you these three things and these three things together, these things map. So we're good to go. So the messaging bus is more about how you orchestrate it. The framework is more about how you talk the same.
Okay. And then CAEP, or Continuous Access Evaluation Profile, is basically leveraging SSF, I got the thumbs up, thank you, to continuously monitor user access, user sessions, things like that. And then because it's an event, you're able to do maybe more dynamic things like access controls, or just sharing that, hey, this particular thing happened, and you share that on using SSF, other things can pick up on that and do what they want with it or not, right?
Spot on. Very session-based, very, very user-heavy. It is a layer on the framework. You're correct. CAEP can be done with more than just users, though. It's identities. So you can do different things like groups of people, like or units. You can do people. You can do IP addresses. You can even do machines if you wanted to. Not there yet, but you were spot on. about it. You are absolutely correct.
So Jim and I had this conversation a little bit. I'm going to throw something out there that we haven't really had a chance to talk about, but can non-humans have an identity, or is identity reserved for humans?
I'm going to channel my inner Dean here. Non-humans can have an identity, but not every non-human identity should be backed by a carbon-based identity.
I like that description, actually. That's pretty good, because I feel like there's a delineation between identity and account, or whatever thing you want to call the access vehicle of how you authenticate to something. That's the way I look at it. Okay, we're going to stop there because I'm winning now, because that means you agree with me and not Jim. So sorry, Jim.
I am Jim. I'm acting as Jim.
The other thing that I've noticed is interop events seem to be picking up for SSF, and I guess maybe CAEP by extension is part of that. There was one at the Gartner conference late last year that I know like Mike Kaiser was a part of. And I guess, tell me about these interop events. Like, what are these things, and help other people, normal people, understand what value they provide to framework developments like SSF and CAEP.
So the interoperability events that happen at Gartner, I mean, they're huge. There's one happening in London as well. The last one was at Dallas. Huge turnout. I mean, it was magnanimous here. So Mike Kaiser was there from SailPoint. Atul Toshibagwale, the godfather of CAEP. He works for Signal. He was there. He was blown away by how many companies and how many vendors have adopted it and are promoting it. It was, again, immense. Like, I know I'm like touting it, but it was like when he gave me the readout, I was just like, wow, this many people. It was enough so that, like, because I'm also a side note, I'm also a co-chair of the Shared Signals Working Group, along with Shane Neal from Cisco and Atul. We had to be very careful about how we made SSF backwards compatible to not break implementers. So the interoperability event is there to really understand how companies can share security information and demonstrate how, like, vendors that support it can help you achieve zero trust principles. Because, again, the best way to link zero trust and like CAEP-ish things is what we're here to talk about is you never trust, you always verify. Continuous identity is the foundation of a zero trust environment. And how you get to that is you got to talk, you got to communicate. How do you communicate? Shared signals, right? CAEP events ride on a shared signals framework. So that interop event is, how do you share things like session revoked, assurance level change, token claims change, session presented, session established, or risk level change. Those are all CAEP events. But if I send you an event, Jeff, that says, hey, this guy Sean looks suspicious, you're like, oh, I have Sean on my system. Nope, Sean's gone. But that's hard to do because you'd have an API, I have an API. How do you, you speak this language, I speak this language. Whereas CAEP gives you the mechanism, whereas SSF gives you the highway to say, how do I communicate?
And so I know you weren't able to make the one in Dallas because you were introducing, new members of the family to your side. What, I guess, take me behind the curtains if you can. Like, do you know what takes place in these things? Is it basically a bunch of people talking? Is there like demonstrations?
It's actually, you're right. It's demonstrated. So they actually get a room there, and they set up tables, and they actually showcase, like, here's how this works. Like, no smoke and mirrors, like actual hands on keyboard. Like, watch this. Cisco interrupted with vendor company A, for example. And I'll use Atul and Shane, for example. Cisco and Signal can talk, right? Or, like, to be very agnostic here, Microsoft Okta can talk, Okta and Ping can talk. I'm not saying they can or they can't, but just it's that kind of a situation. So company A can do it at company B. It doesn't mean that there's not political or legal barriers, but you've demonstrated the ability that I can share with another company. But then legally, can you do that? That's a whole different conversation. But it's a really hands-on interop to showcase that we can actually share information. So it's actually really, really, really awesome.
I'm convinced that this is really important, and I don't know if people really understand it yet, because it probably won't manifest to normal IAM people like me into products probably for a little while still yet, while products are being updated or developed to take advantage of it. But the idea here of having sort of this shared language and being able to take the best out of different products and combine them in new ways that we just haven't been able to do before because everything's been so siloed and proprietary. I don't want to sell this short because I think this is really a really exciting development, and it's going to be open up a lot of eyes for people. Am I drinking the Kool-Aid too much, or are you with me?
Thumbs up. I'm right with you. It is going to breed interop because not every company is going to be all in this vendor. They're going to be, I have a suite of vendors, or I have a suite, and it's going to force standards to work because I keep saying this, standards will set you free. If you adopt a standard, it works, right?
So on the timeline of kind of where we're at as a industry, where do you see us now? Because I feel like maybe we're on the bubble of maybe another era or another phase or a coming phase that might be coming through IAM, but help me understand, like, where do you see IAM today for people?
It's a very loaded question, and it's actually a good question too. I think where we're at right now is we're in a mixture of like an admin and runtime. So we're still very much like offline back office happens before login, and then there's the runtime that can't ever go down. Like, I got to log in, I have SSO, I need access management. Like, and the admin pieces are more like your IGA stuff, like your provisioning, your role management, your access request, your certifications, PAM-ish things, PIM, privileged identity management things. So it's like an awakening, like the calm before the storm. But right now, we're still very much between runtime and admin time. And it's starting to creep into efficiency of work and even security, because stateful entitlements that last for years as you travel between jobs or job titles in where you're employed, you shouldn't have access to things if you change job roles. But right now, that's on your new hire manager to say, "Ooh, Sean left his job A to job B. Go revoke roles or entitlements." We both know that never happens at companies. It just doesn't happen because they just don't have the cycles, right?
Or they forget, right? Humans involved. Humans are going to human, as I like to kind of put it. Go ahead.
No, we're very much at that pre-Renaissance layer. Like, it's like, okay, we got to do something. We don't know what that something is yet, but it's something.
I like that description though of admin and runtime, because I think that maybe helps people understand. It's like, yeah, admin, right? It's people doing stuff, and they're doing it to the best of their ability, I hope, right? Or at least best effort. And you're only as fast as the humans can do it. This idea of runtime, though, I feel like it's like, this is where the puck is going in hockey, and we're skating towards it. So this idea of runtime is, I'm assuming, things like automation and more data driven, or maybe it's more event driven, right? And leveraging things like SSF and CAEP and other things like that. Is that fair? Are they this? If I say something is event driven or data driven, are they the same thing?
So one quick terminology change there. The runtime is more of like where we're at now, like login.
Okay.
Moving towards event-driven, you're correct. And now your question is it event-driven or data-driven? The answer is yes. Chicken and the egg, carrot and the horse, peanut butter and jelly, which one you put on first? We're very much there. We're most companies that I have people that I'm friends with in, they're doing it. They just don't know they're doing it, or they're doing it in pockets. Like, oh, I had this side project, this thing. They're like, oh, I have this data feed coming in. You're doing it. You just don't know it. So if you're making decisions off of data and taking actions on it, you are essentially doing event-driven IAM, which is AKA continuous identity management, or whatever Gartner wants to call it. Ian Glazer and I both talk like, they will fix the terminology. We're just going to call it one of those two things, and hopefully it sticks. And if it doesn't, great. We'll pick a new buzzword, right? But you were right. You need data to drive events, but in order to get data, you need events. So chicken and the egg, right? So that unlocks a lot of things like signal processing, continuous auditing. It's going to change governance as we know it, which is a different conversation because that's hours of talk there. It's going to change identity management, session management, access management, and it gets you to like zero trust, the real zero trust, not like network access, but like essentially moving more towards a zero trust foundation. But I can't trust enough that with change, auditing, governance, it's all going to change. But again, slowly, bits and pieces, not all at once, but it is coming. It is like the golden age of IAM, the Renaissance. It's like, hey, IAM figured out, oh, this is event-driven architecture. This is awesome. Let's do this. And it's like, it is.
Like we just invented like I don't know, the calculator or something like that. It's like it's going to get a lot better. But I tend to be a little more conservative when I think timelines in IAM, because while certainly organizations might be on cutting edge, I think for every cutting edge organization, there's probably 100 or 1,000 that are not, right? They're still trying to get the basics done. They're still maybe accepting a fax and saying, here's my onboarding form, right, to get onboarded. Or they're just now getting into multi-factor authentication, and maybe they're forced to do it because of either cyber risk or an event or things like that. As much as I like where this is going, I tend to be more conservative from a timeline perspective. So I'm going to throw out there something and say, okay, is this like from my perspective, I think this is a 5 to 10 year sort of migration or shift from runtime to event driven for the majority of, I would call, organizations that are doing something for identity to really kind of do it. I don't think it is like this is going to happen this year or next year. I think those are going to be leading edge. They're going to be early adopters. They're going to be organizations that are well funded and really have their sort of identity act together. Is that a fair, and I don't want to call it a criticism because I don't think it really is criticism. It's just, hey, this is the timing of the real world. But is that a fair, I guess, observation that I'm having, or should I readjust that somehow?
If only money grew on trees, right? The fact is, businesses operate on a budget, and everyone's budget is different. I can see the mom and pop shops going slower. I can see the companies that do billions and trillions of dollars in revenue that have more risk will adopt this faster. It's going to sound crazy, but it's going to be a risk-based approach, because if you look at it from that aspect, you're going to want to secure something that makes $14 million a minute. Whereas if you're securing a flower shop that brings in $100 revenue a year, no.
Well, if you're doing a flower shop at $100 a year, maybe it's not really a shop. It's more of an Etsy or a hobby.
Yeah.
At that point.
but you make a solid point where I don't think it's 5 to 10. I think it's 3 to 5.
You think really organizations will move that quickly onto this?
I think they're not going to have a choice because of the advent of technology and how fast it's going, where even if they can't move it that fast, I mean, what I'm seeing in IAM right now is the startup community is rampant. They're taking off. There's a lot of startups that are going to offer this as a service, and it's going to work.
Do you think organizations get pulled along by their vendors, or do organizations push their vendors in this case?
Depends on the organization, but some people like the tell me what you want me to do approach. Some people like to actually drive a vendor. I mean, I've seen both in my tenure across my career. I think you're going to get the early adopters that are going to push the vendors to play with standards like CAEP and SSF. But like every company's in it, every company's business is just to make money. But if you're marketing to like the Fortune 50s, makes sense. The Fortune 500s. Again, you hit it nail on the head. Is it data or event? Companies that know their data, that can invest in their data, will drive this, because they're gonna drive their vendors to be like, here's how I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you using these standards. Then at that point, this sounds very draconian, but things like your IDPs, your PAM systems, and your IGA systems become appliances, but they're important appliances. It's not going to be like a converged solution. You're not going to have like, oh, vendor A does all my stuff. That ship is sailed, I think. Again, my opinion. Again, it can work for some companies, but not all.
Well, you kind of hit where I was thinking here is it is a data problem to solve for. A lot of organizations just don't have good data management. Or maybe they're collecting and they haven't done anything with it. So now we're back to that chicken egg of events generating data, being able to generate more events, right? Things like that. In the real world, what do you see as like, okay, you need these things to really think about this next step when it goes to event driven? Is it go get your data? If you're talking to the millions of Identity Center viewers and listeners, and they're like, Sean told me to go do this so we could set up for the next stage, which is this. What is this? And then
The biggest thing is to have a story and know your data, because you could go invest tons of money in this, and if your data is just swampy, you're going to have a swamp. When I say know your data, clean data, marshal data, and I know that sounds like a very pipe dream, but get your identity data right first. And what does that mean? So how many companies onboard people without doing verification or proofing? In the workforce, a lot. They take HCM systems word for it, like, yeah, I proofed the person, they faxed me over the I-9s and the license thing, manual entry. I mean, let's face it, it's public knowledge that there are some countries that are coming after domestically, and they're faking documents. Gen AI is a thing. It's very easy to fake stuff now, right? So getting that right at the entry point makes everything else clean and simple. But if you get it wrong at the entry point, you create a fractured web of just distributed nonsensory. And yes, you can trademark that word and use it royalty free, but you want to create line segments. Like you want to have event, data, event, action. But if you have, is this Jeff? I don't know. But if you give Jeff the wrong entitlement, security risk. If you onboard Jeff twice, now I have 18 accounts to worry about. So in a way, if you get your data right, you can decrease your spend across the board on PAM, IGA systems, account management. You won't have account drift. You won't have account sprawl, role sprawl. All those are real problems. They always start at the base foundation of your data. Like know your data. When I say know it, intimately know it. Like know how bad it is. Like, do you accept people that come in with like, my last name's O? Really? Why? Oh, it's an apostrophe. Oh, I hate when that happens, right? You don't want to do the ampersand NBSP colon. No, I don't want to do that. That's just, we're just going to screw up that, right? So, and this is a different topic, but when you get to continuous management, you're providing building blocks for an architecture that has real benefits for security, privacy, and user experience. And you're evaluating context and data signals. Context is supplementary to data signals. So getting your, going identity first is a dream for most companies, but how you onboard and who you are as a person are two different things. Prove to me you are who you say you are through a vetted process using identity document verification, like talking licenses, passports, etc. Once I have that and you are who you say you are, the rest of it is just a relationship, and it's an engagement, and it's just consent. Jeff wants to work for company A. Do you consent to share this information with me? Absolutely. Great. This is you. I'm good to go. I know that's you now. Now, contextual signals. Jeff always logs in using a device from a location to these places. It feels very Orwellian, but it's not. It's meant to keep you safe and your company safe, because it's a problem right now. The government's passing sweeping regulation to where they're putting the onus on the companies to keep their data safe, because we're a target. Every company is a target, and it goes back down to never trust, always verify. That's the beginning. Continuous identity is the foundation of a zero trust environment. And as much context you can pull into your data fabric, if you will, like you pull in stuff like your ITSM systems, your CMDB systems, your change management, Jira, GitHub, anything you can hang off of an identity that says, this is what Jeff normally does and it's good. You can derive what's normal, what's not normal, because at the end, no one should be tracking what you're doing. It's more of that one time you accept that push. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's the time. That's what you don't want to happen.
So this idea of data hygiene and knowing your data really strikes me as a business process problem to
100%.
solve for. A lot of times identity teams are not the ones generating the data. And I'll go beyond things like authentication or authorizations, things like that, right? It might be application owners who really are the ones who are, generating authorization data. It might be, like you mentioned, HR teams or HIRS, however your organization works, for people data. Maybe there's not even a source for non-humans. Maybe it's, service accounts live in our Active Directory and it is what it is. What are some tips for having this discussion with non-technical people to help them understand that we need to fix the business process so we can fix the data problem, or part of the data problem, I should say?
I think I already alluded to it. You have to have proofing and verification at the gate, whether you do it at hiring, interview, or onboarding. A lot of times the person who interviews for the job who shows up may not be the same person. That's the security aspect mind of things. So you're talking about business process. If you really look at it from an identity first, not access first standpoint, if you flip the model and say, Jeff wants to work at a company, prove to me who you are, Jeff. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Now you have an engagement with a company. I want to employ Jeff at company A. Awesome. Identity drives it all. So I now can provision to your HR, HRIS systems and seamless user experience. You can do, let's use the word birthright provisioning, which I personally don't like because it's, again, you need good data for this. So if you hang off this great identity data and you have supplemental HR, HRIS, HCM data, attribution, you can start driving things like, if Jeff's a manager in finance, he gets access to these things. But vice versa, if I still know you're Jeff and you're always Jeff and you say who you are and you change jobs, automation, or it's like, oh, there's another manager who had to onboard Jeff again because they got a new job title and,
or maybe converted from contractor to employee or vice versa.
Oh, let's go there. Yeah, I'm glad you went there. A lot of times it's, I can't wait for processes to fire. I'm just going to circumvent them and go that way. This would stop that because it wouldn't allow bad data to come into the ecosystem and create that no more of a line, just a fractured web. Because now it's like, there's 3 Jeffs. Who are you? Here you're the same person, but it's like, why do I need to have 9 accounts, 15 profiles in SaaS application 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? It's just really annoying, right? I cannot stress enough that your data is the most important piece of this, because without your data, the event stuff is just, it's more problematic, honestly.
So let's talk about that data, because I feel like we're going to find data everywhere. Like everything is generating data. Is this a situation where we need to do maybe some internal cleansing or centralization of it? And I think, things like data lakes have been and probably still are popular. Do you dump everything into sort of like, hey, here's a central repository of everything that we want our identity team to do stuff with? Maybe it's a SIM or maybe it's something custom. How much of that, I don't know, cleansing or centralization of data really needs to take place for this to work? Can I get away with having 8, 10, 100 different data sources?
In which order do you want me to answer those questions?
Whatever order makes the most sense to make sense of my gobbledygook.
So Ian and I have talked about this ad nauseum. There's a need for a schema. So that'll be a different conversation for hopefully a different podcast. But let's just pretend that there's one out there. The reason why you want to centralize this, it's for taxonomy and single pane of glass. A lot of companies want to get to the question, who has access to what, why, and when, and who did it? That is the easiest question to state and the hardest to answer. I'm sure, Jeff, in your travels with your clients, is like, yeah, everyone wants to get to that.
Yeah.
The answer is usually like, IGA can do this. No, I can't. No, it can, but
it can do parts of it, but not everything.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So how many sources do you pull in? That is a very subjective answer. I would start with separating identity from HR, because the two are not the same, and they should be treated mutually exclusive. Because here's a use case for you. I may have pre-hire activity that I have to do that won't put me into an HR system. So how do you get access to those applications? You have to do it from an IAM context. I got to give you something to log in with to access some systems, but you're not an HR backed identity yet. You're just like, you're Jeff.
You're a guest of some sort
with the company. Yep. You're interested. So that's the first concept, is like, get that right. And that comes back down to how do you ingest that? And that's a 4-hour conversation. But again, you could do proofing, verification. You could just have a form, Excel spreadsheet. Don't recommend any of that stuff. It's bad. But going identity first solves a lot of this problem, because this isn't a knock on anything in HR. It's just they don't vet it. Like, you get a request in and it's like, hey, I'm a hiring manager, hire this person. Cool. Save. They don't check.
I don't know if that's fair, because I feel like our HR people out there do things like I-9s, at least in the US, right? Kind of initial verification.
No, they do.
I'm with you in that it doesn't take place past that first day.
Correct. But let's play your contract to full-time employee case again. I'm converting. Take your Workdays, your SAPs, your Bumblebee, your Bamboo software. The stringent security model you have to have in IAM does not exist in HR systems, because that's getting you into their system to do their stuff. But if your HR systems get access to things, you've opened up a can of worms. And to your point, it's not fair to say all HR employees or all HR workers don't validate or fact check it, but talk to practitioners. They want to pull their hairs out.
It's not a hill I'll die on to say it's 100%. I think,
but it's not zero.
It's definitely not zero. I think what typically happens is, especially in this world of changing from a contractor to an employee, that is sometimes very iffy, because a lot of organizations don't do a good job of tracking their contractors being with all their non-employees, vendors, partners, etc. People have access to different things. I think it's gotten better over the last 5 years or so, as I've been in the consulting biz for about 9 years now. I've seen it improve, but it's still not where it needs to be. So my question now becomes, okay, now we're talking about a business process. And I keep going back to the business process of this, and say, okay, whose responsibility is it to let HR know that, oh, this is a contractor converting to a full-time employee, or vice versa? Is it the manager? Is it the contractor themselves? Like, what is, like, I think there's a shared responsibility here for people who are responsible or have accountability for identity or person data to have a business process that makes sense and is livable in the real world. And I see organizations do it a lot of different ways. I don't think there's like a right way and a wrong. The wrong way to do it is to not do anything. There's a lot of right ways you could do it. And I guess, that idea of business process seems like it's such an important part of this data problem.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's more about shared responsibility. And I think when you combine HR teams and managers and identity teams, that's why having both HR context and identity context in your data lake swamp helps to give a feedback loop. So you should always be pushing back and forth to say, listen, this looks weird. Is it legit? Oh, it is. Okay, cool. We're good to go. But it's always good to have like a reconciliation or a feedback loop in any data platform. It's actually 101 when building a data platform. So,
well, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of 101 that needs to maybe take place for data for a lot of companies. I know there were some other things you wanted to bring up. We haven't really talked about things like sessions and things like that, but what else is important here that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, so it's more of the continuous aspect. So I want to get into like session management and access management. So let's say, for example, that you're evaluating some context and you're pulling in endpoint logs, or you're pulling in device logs from pick your vendor of choice. This is the whole problem of like some really big companies that are in the news for security incidents that happened. And like, you can keep this very, very high level. When you have context coming into your fabric and you know that something looks anomalous, you now have the ability to start revoking sessions. Now, is it just like, oh, put this into a data lake and it magically happens? No. But this comes back down to like all of your IAM systems become appliances to help you orchestrate session management. So an example, if I know you continually come in from North Carolina on an Apple device, it's you. But if I see you all of a sudden coming in from Nebraska, Texas, you travel a lot. Okay. But ordinarily, same things. But what this gives you is session management at scale, which is very hard to solve in identity right now. So that's one example that I think is tantamount. Another good important one is I'm going to say identity management. And what does that mean? So not only can I revoke things, but this is going into like the CAEP-ish things. But if I know that you're constantly under attack, like everyone's going after Jeff because he has privileged access to a ton of stuff, and they're spraying it across the board. And let's say, forbid, someone grabs your session, has your token, and they're just going after all your apps. Not only can I revoke it, but now I can be like, oh, there's a pattern here. There's a behavioral pattern that they're going after this. I now can turn your accounts off, revoke your access. I can call your IGA platform and start revoking all your roles and entitlements to keep the company safe and keep you safe, because you may not have done it knowingly, right? So there's access management pieces to this in the continuous aspect where the data fabric, the ingest of data signals gets you more secure, but it also gives you the ability to start being dynamic. And this is Jeff. We'll just use Jim because he's not here. So sorry, Jim. Jeff and Jim are of like roles. When you have a data lake and you collect, like, Jeff's a manager, Jim's a manager. Why do you have access to 500 systems and he has 5? Who's right, who's wrong? So now you get to actually go look at this from an analyst standpoint and be proactive to say, do we have role drift here? Is this right or is this wrong? And then you actually can, using this framework, act on it and say, please do this. And then when I'm saying wave the magic wand, for those of you who are listening on podcast, I'm waving my hand across, right? Now you can use your IDPs, your IGA platform to say, remove them from group A, group B, remove them from this role, remove these applications. So we're getting towards more event driven. So when you have an HR signal that changes, that says Jeff has went from engineer 1 to manager, guess what? You've lost your GitHub repo access, your Confluence, your Atlassian stuff. This is policy now. Now you could drive this to a policy framework. So gets even more interesting now. So this is where auditing comes into play. You're no longer doing user access reviews. Your policy states that any manager in this company is baseline access. Any engineer is baseline access. So if I have an event that comes in and says, job title went from engineer to manager, policy happens. Now, when your auditors come in and say, I want to evaluate user access reviews, you're like, you don't have to. Here's the policy. And you want audit logs? Insert vendor, insert thing. Here you go. Here are your audit logs. Not only does this revolutionize things, but it actually drives costs down from an auditing standpoint. I mean, the big four may be like, the big four will have to probably change how they audit some things, but it should make it easier all along. Because if you have a policy that states these four things, that's more binary. Is everything going to fit into this puzzle? No, absolutely not. Is the 80%? We hope. Shrug, question mark. But I can't say it enough that identity management and session management access, I purposely call it identity management and access management as different things because one's behavioral and one's data driven. I think this is changing how we're going to do our jobs in identity. I really do.
Well, I think it'll definitely change the way auditors need to look at it. And I think this is some education that'll probably need to take place by identity teams out there to say, here's how this thing works. They're going to want proof and, is it working the way the system is designed, right? Documentation and all that. And there's probably a break-in period where, they're probably going to look at it a little bit harder or weirder as they get more comfortable with it. But as it becomes more commonplace, then identity teams are able to demonstrate that, look, it does work. We do have a policy. here's how the policy works and how the configurations work, and that comfortability grows, it'll become a lot easier, I think, for auditors to look at it.
And what you and you make a great point. You made me think about something that I wanted to touch on. It's a zero trust principle. I love when Ian said this, and he always takes the contrarian viewpoint, which is great. Least privilege is a lie. I'm a believer of that. I know we've talked about that ad nauseum. When implemented the right way, purchased, implemented, built, purchased, hybrid of things, you kind of get zero standing privilege for some aspects of things. Let me explain what that means. You have this data fabric of HR signals and context signals. And let's say you do change management, right? Now you can start taking your most targeted systems, and let's take the most beloved cloud provider that has the most target in most companies, which is AWS, right? I gave a talk about this at Identities last year. You now can take authorization with context that says, Sean does not need this access. Sean is an engineer. He should have access. Awesome. That's one guardrail. Do I need it on Saturday at 8 p.m., at 9 a.m.? Maybe not. How do I know that? You use things like Salesforce, whatever ticket system you want to use, ServiceNow, Jira, GitHub, take your pick, right? When you have that additional context on your fabric that says Sean is an engineer that has an open thing attached to him, I'm going to be granting him AWS access for this ephemeral period of time. Great. So you just minimize your footprint. You haven't really destroyed a user experience. You should have proper change management in place for production systems that could do financial harm to a company. That's your business sell right there. Is we need this for security, but it's also not gonna. It's actually gonna improve user experience if you think about it, because you're still going to be able to apply provisioning aspects to this with security mindset. So I just gave you a zero trust principle, but with provisioning, it's the same concept. Sean's been proofed. He got hired. Here's your policy. Sean's an engineer. He should have access to GitHub, GitLab, take your soup du jour of systems. That doesn't mean I'm granted access to every project in there. It means that I can get into it. Great. Now what? Okay. Now I'm working with team A, team B, team C. Okay. I have a Jira item associated to me. I can now grant you really granular access to those platforms based on a task or a just-in-time approach. To me, as a practitioner, I love that, because you don't get that call saying like, hey, it's Saturday. I need to know what so-and-so had access to at so-and-so point in time because so-and-so accept that MFA prompt. It's like, dang, I hate when people keep doing that, right? But that's the security side of me. But there's also business value here where provisioning in this gets more real time versus like, see you in 2 weeks, see you in a week, wait for a device, wait for an email, where event driven gets you both business procurement quicker, better security, better access management, and better session management. So to me, it's the I want to say trifecta, but it's wrong because there's 5 things there. So 5-fecta, if you will. I mean,
quinfecta, is that
quinfecta? That's right. Yeah. Penfecta, if you will.
Penfecta. This smells a lot like zero standing privileges to me, which to me, and shout out to John Morton, who opened my eyes up to this a couple of years ago when we first met. But this is kind of like the holy grail almost for authentication and authorization, where people are walking around and they have this ephemeral access where they only need it and the point in time that they need it, and then it goes away. And then,
right,
super secure if account gets popped.
It's less about authentication. It's more about authorization. I said it at my talk. Take my session, have it. I don't care. I mean, not really, but like I'm saying, like you can have it. Mm-hmm. That isn't the attack point anymore. Like you can go after my session, hijack it. Okay. Have fun. Have Syria menu. But if you have
enough data elsewhere and you're using shared signals framework and you're taking advantage of things like that and CAEP and interop between all these different tools, right? They've signed on and now their tools are capable of it. Can you imagine, right? It's almost like identity 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever phase we want to call it, right? It's like, okay, this is
I
all the
love
stuff
that you
we've been
called it
talking
that.
about.
I love that you call it that, because I had a conversation with a couple of people about it, and I'm like, is it continuous IAM or is it identity 2.0? And they're like, too soon.
Yeah, it's too soon. We got to wait. All I know is it's got to have a cool acronym. That's the most important thing. And then we'll figure out the name. So we need to come up with the acronym first, and then we'll figure out what to call it.
Exactly.
Let's see. I feel we covered a lot of ground. I'm sure we missed something, or I'm not thinking of something. Is there anything else that you want to bring up to the table now? Because I know you're going to have probably more conversations about this Identiverse, and it's too much to cover in a 45-minute or an hour episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What else?
There's going to be a 2-hour workshop at Identiverse. I highly encourage you to go to the site, check it out. Might be running it. I'll know later in February. Maybe giving talks if I'm chosen by the board, which is great. I do want to end on we never really covered define what continuous IAM is, or continuous identity, and I just want to give a very blanket statement. That way people are like, this is great, give me a sentence that I can go back and say this is what this thing is. So continuous identity, continuous IAM, used interchangeably, is the ability to apply controls to an existing identity-based session utilizing signals received and processed by your fabric. Fabric is a very nebulous term, but it could be like your data lake or your orchestration layer. But essentially, that's what this is, and you're building a foundation to get to real-time and continuous and event-driven things. And you're right, Jeff. We covered a lot. I think it's almost like sensory overload, but it's a lot to think about. I'm open on LinkedIn. Questions, hit me up. I love talking about it, so it doesn't bother me at all.
All right, let's end on a lighter note here. Jim and I were very fortunate to be at the Gartner conference at the end of 2024, and turnabout is fair play. Our friend Rebecca Archambault invited us on stage to interview us, which is really a shoe on the other foot, because we did that to her and Henrique Teixeira when he was with Gartner, I think 2 years ago at this point. And so we had this conversation, kind of, learn more about kind of like what do we do in the podcast and some of the interesting stories we had. So it was like one of the last sessions of the event. So thankful for all the people who showed up for that. And I think we had a really good kind of fun discussion. One of my favorite things that I've introduced to the show over the years has been this lighter note, because it lets me ask really challenging, interesting questions. And this is one that I brought up to the audience, and I brought it up before in the show. And so, Sean, I'm going to ask you. This is a profound question of, if you were a potato, how would you want to be prepared?
Initial thought is not like Mark Watney on The Martian.
Okay.
That's bad. So don't like that.
So there's a couple ways you could take this. And I shared my thoughts on this with the audience at Gartner, but do you take it with the idea of, what's delicious, right, in your mind? Like, what's your favorite style of potato when you eat them? Or do you take the Jim route, which is, and Jim McDonald, as in my co-host, is he thinks about it from a pain perspective. What is going to be the least painful way to go as a potato? And there's other variations on that, but those seem to be the two most common.
Yeah. I was thinking raw, but that's not how you serve potatoes, because no one eats a raw potato. That's just not happening.
Somebody out there, the raw potato gang, is getting ready to send you a bunch of DMs and messages on LinkedIn.
I'm almost leaning towards loaded or mashed, and I think I'm going to go with mashed because it is the most delicious. I love mashed potatoes. I love potatoes. So butter, cream, potato. It's the simplest thing. It goes with anything. It goes well with all the things, and it blends well. So that's my answer. You can
eat just that and have sustenance.
Yeah.
Potato, the perfect food. I don't know. Maybe that's our next podcast episode.
Also, because my kid loves potatoes, so he's like, potato. I'm like, okay, we're good.
I mean, it's hard to beat a McDonald's French fry. I feel like when it's prepared and fresh, that's really good. I'm an au gratin person myself, so I like kind of a cheesy potato, experience, as I'll call it.
It's good too, yeah.
Hash browns are really good. A nice crispy hash brown. I mean, Yeah, I could go on and on for hours. Maybe we'll make a potato at the center
You're making me
podcast
hungry.
at some point.
Potato at the center. That's funny.
All right. Well, you're hungry. I'm hungry. We've been talking here for a bit. I do appreciate you coming back. I'm looking forward to seeing you at Identiverse later this year. And congratulations on the new addition to the family. And again, very cool setup you got behind you. So if you're listening to this, hop on over to the YouTube channel and take a look at Sean's background. It's rife with Star Wars stuff, which is super cool.
Thanks.
We'll go ahead and leave it there for this week. As I mentioned, I'll have links in the show notes for your LinkedIn profile with Sean. I'll also have a link for our discount for EIC. Again, IDAC 25MKO. What else? Links to Jim and I. And yeah, like, subscribe, do all that fun things that are great for social, and share it with friends and enemies. I don't care who you share it with, as long as they listen and or watch. So go ahead and leave it. Thanks everybody for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with y'all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.